In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.
Welcome back to another edition of the Daily Memphian's Memphis Grizzlies podcast. This is your host, Drew Hill, joined as always by columnist Chris Herrington. If I sound funny, it's because my nose is stuffed. I may have the Grizzlies crud, the stuff that is going around the locker room currently, Chris Herrington. We'll see. I might wake up feeling better tomorrow, but we'll see what happens. And it has been a busy week for the Memphis Grizzlies. They had a loss on Tuesday night against the Denver Nuggets. The sky was very briefly falling, and then they turned it around and played the getting healthy Philadelphia 76ers, who then stopped getting healthy in the game against the Grizzlies and got a win. And in doing so, helped Taylor Jenkins set the Grizzlies franchise record for regular season wins as the head coach. So a lot to get into, but let's just start with your big picture takeaways from the latest two games, the back-to-back.
It was a nice bounce back. I mean, considering the opponent, Philly team in some turmoil, but still, I thought the Grizzlies played a much better game on Wednesday night to get that win. I thought the game against Denver on Tuesday was the worst performance of the season for the Grizzlies, all things considered, because they were bad. They made a little run in the second half, but it was sort of too late, and so they were to me too casual right out of the gate against Denver on Tuesday, and you're going to lose games you feel like you should win, but there's been a few too many of those, I think, so far this season. I thought that was the worst of the bunch, but it was a good bounce back the next night against Philly, and the schedule set up over the next 5 games. You're probably not going to go 5-0, but they need to have a winning record these next 5 games. They're set up to pad their record a little bit and get some distance from 500 now.
Yeah, so the response from Tuesday's game. So Tuesday's game was, you called it what you thought was the worst performance of the season. I would tend to agree. They didn't shoot it well from 3. They couldn't shoot it in the paint. They were consistently beat up the court in transition.
Right.
Essentially nothing went well for them. And I think there was some disappointment on the part of Taylor Jenkins and some disappointment on the part of the locker room. And, I stuck around and waited out for Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson on Tuesday night, who both did not play well. Jaren had 7 turnovers and Desmond Bane was 1 of 10. It was the first time since his rookie season that Desmond Bane hasn't had at least 2 field goals in a game. And he didn't make his first one until the 10th try, and it was a layup. So probably his worst game since his rookie season. And I think that they sort of talked about wanting to have this response, and that this response was going to start with them, that they're the leaders on the team, and everyone from top to bottom, whether that be Taylor Jenkins, Desmond Bane, or Jaren Jackson, all acknowledged that this team has consistency issues, or did have consistency issues. Maybe they fixed them in the one game. Who knows? It'd be impossible to tell. But I found that to be interesting, and I found that to be encouraging that they both came out and backed it up with good games against the Sixers. Did you make anything of that?
Yeah, well, Bane in particular. I mean, Jaren had a lot of turnovers against Denver in that second game, but Jaren has been pretty consistent. We've reached the point with Jaren where he has 25 points and 2 blocks and you just shrug at it. It's like that's just what he does every night. Bane had a really strong game, and it was even stronger than his box score. His box score was good. It was like 21 points, 10 boards, 5 or 6 assists. But more than that, I thought he sort of took control of the game. He hit the deep 3 to tie it at 31-31 in the first quarter, and then went to the bench. And when he came back for the last half of the second quarter, he went on a tear and basically took control of the game, built the lead that they never fully lost. They sort of flirted with a little bit late, but never fully lost. And then when he came back in the fourth quarter, he made, a couple big plays to push it up to 19 before Philly made their run. So I thought Desmond Bain, he didn't just make shots, he had a presence. In his words after the game, he was sort of asked him about, breaking out of, 3 games, not much of a shooting slump, breaking out of that. He basically said, I wasn't worried about missing a couple shots. I knew I was going to be better tonight. I didn't know what that was going to mean. I'm paraphrasing. I didn't know what that was going to mean in terms of numbers, but I knew I was going to lead. His focus was on, I'm going to lead the team tonight. And that is what he did. He took control of the game.
Yeah, while we're on Bain, we can also go back to Tuesday for a second time because, he didn't play well, but he wasn't like hanging his head. And at one point he said something along, he was clearly trying to be positive in the moment, but at one point he came along and said something like, I feel like we have this conversation every single year where, we're talking about this, us trying to find our footing and then, eventually we do it. And that is true. And I pointed out to him because I had just looked it up. I was like, yep, that is true. You started 8-7 in one of the years you won 50 games. You started 9-6 in one of the years you won 50 games. Both seasons they won 11 in a row at some point.
I wrote about this early in the season. I can't remember which two. It was one of the 250-win seasons. Maybe the other one was the season where they went up against Utah as the 1-8. But 2 of the 3 seasons in which they made the playoffs, they started 9-10. So they had a losing record through 19 games, and then went on a tear, somewhere in December, January. That has been the tendency of Taylor Jenkins teams, is that they really catch their stride sometime in December or January.
Yes. So I guess where I was going with this is that you mentioned the schedule coming up and that it is easy. And I'm of 2 minds because
John Morant.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Like I'm of 2 minds. It's like, yeah, this is maybe the best opportunity for them to hit that kind of run and just to do it now, starting in November versus December, January. But you're also without Ja, which obviously complicates things.
I'm not saying that this is when they're going to be their best self, the best version of the team. I think that's going to come later. But I'm saying they have enough to win the games in front of them for the next week. And I think you can get those wins without being the best version of yourself. You could win at Chicago, home Portland, home Detroit, home New Orleans, which is a total mess, home Indiana, which is struggling. Like those are all, you're gonna be favored in the next 5 games if you're the Grizzlies, and like you should like win 4 of them. Even without being the best version of yourself.
So we will see what happens. I do want to ask you about a few other players, but first let's take a break for a message from our sponsor.
Want to make a big impact without getting lost in a big system? Join Youth Villages to be a force for families while becoming part of one. Help make positive changes on a national scale, one community at a time. It takes a family to transform lives. Start with yours. Apply now at youthvillages.org/careers.
You know who else has been intriguing to me over these last 2 games do you have a guess?
No, I was just going to say there's so many options I can't guess. I got no idea what you're about to say.
Yeah, you're right. I'm thinking about all the directions I could go. This is the direction I was going to go. Santi, who scored 26, or was it 28? It might have been 28 on Tuesday in the loss, and was like the player that kept the Grizzlies afloat against Denver and gave them maybe a chance to make a run, and then came back against Philadelphia and didn't play that well, but I thought did a decent enough job. He's interesting because he started the season shooting it really well, scoring the ball at a high rate. Everybody sort of pointed to him as like breakout guy. Now it was easy to do that because he was the first guy to have a big night. But everybody pointed at him and said breakout guy. Then the shooting kind of took a dip, and now it's coming back. I don't know what to make of this. He's interesting to me.
The shooting, there's a disconnect between what it looks like he should shoot based on just watching him play and what he actually shoots to this point in his career as a 3-point shooter. And I would say the dip has been pretty long. I just pulled up his game log. So he hit he had a big opening night when they beat Utah at Utah. He hit 5 of 10 from 3. and then 2 games later 4 or 6. So 2 good shooting nights in his first 3 games. Then after that, it's a long stretch of like not very good. And he didn't have another game with more than two until that game against Denver like 2 nights ago. And so, there's a long stretch of bad shooting in between the very beginning of the season and these last couple games. I I, I don't know what's real yet because the numbers would tell you he's a mediocre 3-point shooter, but your eyes tell you he's better than that. And so I really don't know where it's going to go in terms of that.
So he is one of how many guys that are on an expiring deal? It is him, Jake, uh, Luke,
Yes, Luke,
correct? And
correct.
and Jaren is eligible for an extension,
Yeah, no, Jared's not expiring. Jared's under contract for next season already.
but
Um,
he could get a new deal.
he could.
Technically, he won't.
I'm not counting on that, but yeah,
Yeah,
he could. That might be it. I'm trying to think because Marcus Smart's got another year after this.
right. Of those three guys, who's impressed you the most? Is it Jake?
Jake, I think
Yeah.
relative to expectation, it's Jake because he was I think third on the list in terms of expectation. But it may be that Jake has just been the best player of the three all around. I think Santi has better numbers. Santi tends to get more shots. But I think totality of play, offense and defense, and consistency game to game, I'm not sure Jake LaRavia has been the best player of those three.
When you try to figure out what the future of those three guys may look like, because I think it's pretty easy to say right now in this moment, like, oh, the Grizzlies might have made a mistake in declining the team option on LaRavia. Like that's easy to say right now, but
It's easy to say, but I think it's probably true. But I think it's a minor
yes,
mistake. If it's a mistake, it's a small one, but I do think it's probably a mistake.
right. And then obviously they had a chance to get an extension done with Aldama, and they decided that they were going to let him play,
Yeah.
out this season. And like, I'm just trying to figure out like what is the most likely path forward for all three of those guys? What's the chances that all three could be on different teams next year?
Well,
What do you think?
I think it's hard. You're more restricted in what you can do with LaRavia because in not exercising the option, you cannot now give him more than what the option was, right? And so you're sort of restricted to the 1 year, 5 million. And I'm not saying Jake LaRavia is going to get some big free agency offer, but I don't know. Some team going to offer him 3 years and 15 or what? He may prefer that than the 1 year, 5. I think 1 year, 5 is not a lot of flexibility for a useful young player. So I think they're in a tough spot with him, maybe. Santi's going to be a restricted free agent, and I don't think he's going to have the kind of season where there's going to be massive offers out there for him. I think if they want Santi back, they can have Santi back with the restricted rights. And Luke, who knows? Like, what's the market going to be? I mean, obviously the market was not robust for him. Was not robust for players like him, not just him, but for players like him this summer. Gary Trent, it's a roughly similar player signed for a minimum, to play with Milwaukee. And so players like Luke Kennard, who are sort of low-level starter or backup shooting guards, who are just sort of, more single position guys who aren't great defensively, that kind of player, good players to have, but there's not a huge market for those guys in free agency.
All right, we should also talk about Taylor Jenkins, who
Yeah.
set the franchise record for regular season wins. Regular season, I think I clarified that in the feature, but
Well,
I think there's been some confusion.
that is what those records mean. That's the way those
Right.
records are kept. Like LeBron James is the NBA's all-time leading scorer. That does not factor in playoff scoring, right? That's the way we do records.
If we want to get really technical, Taylor Jenkins wasn't on the court for some of those wins during COVID, nor a win this season, and he still gets credit for them.
This is true, but that's true of other
So,
coaches in similar situations.
Yeah,
You know,
I'm just pointing it out, like on a technicality. But it's not worth going down that road.
right?
I thought it was noteworthy the way that the players spoke about him afterwards, not just to the media, but then sharing on social media themselves. I am not the Grizzlies historian that you are, obviously. and I know you've probably been asked this 3 or 4 times already, but where do you think Taylor Jenkins falls in the context of all Grizzlies coaches?
I'm going to answer that, but I want to react to something you said right before this first about sort of the relationship with the players and that kind of thing. I was standing in the locker room last night, and I sort of stood and did like a 360 panorama around all the lockers and looked at the nameplates of the players, and I started counting it, and it occurred to me that of the 18 players, including the 3 two-way guys, of the 18 players in the locker room, I counted 13 who had never had another NBA head coach, just Taylor Jenkins,
Crazy.
right?
It's
So
crazy.
it doesn't give them like necessarily a lot to compare him to. That said, he obviously has a good relationship with his players. And I asked, we were both in the scrum with Luke Kennard, and Luke Kennard is one of the guys who has had other NBA head coaches. And I asked Kennard, not to compare Taylor Jenkins to other head coaches he's had, but to say something about Taylor Jenkins that is specific to him. It's not just something you'd say about any coach. Like, what is specific about Taylor Jenkins? And what he talked about was the degree of attention Taylor Jenkins gives every player individually, not just as players but as people, and that sort of that care he puts into building their relationships is something he thought jumps out with Taylor Jenkins. And I think that it's clear that Taylor Jenkins cares about his players and they care about him in turn. And that's like a really important thing for a head coach. A head coach is not just X's and O's for 48 minutes. It's a bigger thing than that. And I think Taylor Jenkins has clearly been very strong at the totality of being a head coach. And so that'll lead me into answering your question, which is, to me, I think Taylor Jenkins is a very good coach. But to me, the story of him becoming the Grizzlies leading, top of the Grizzlies rankings and coaching wins is the story of longevity, relative to the other good coaches the franchise has had. They've had other good coaches, and he's not necessarily better or worse than the other good coaches, but he's been around longer. I think it's a story of longevity, and the story of longevity is a story of franchise stability, which he has enjoyed in a way that the other good coaches hasn't. But he contributes to that stability. Like, he gets credit for that too. And so you compare him to Lionel Hollins. Lionel Hollins would have put a lot bigger number on the board for Taylor Jenkins to chase. Lionel Hollins was not brought back as head coach after winning 56 games and going to the conference finals. And that's because during Lionel Hollins' coaching tenure, the team changed ownership and changed front offices, and the new guys wanted to hire their own coach. They didn't want to keep the coach that they inherited. And so that was something that, cost Lionel Hollins a job. Taylor Jenkins is still playing for the same owner and the same lead executive who hired him. And I think that's given him a lot more breathing room than maybe other coaches would face, even with the same good results, because the results are good, but he's only won one playoff series.
Yeah, no, that is true. And, as part of the feature that I wrote on Taylor and sort of what that moment would mean to certain people, I not only went back and found the first win, which obviously was incredibly memorable, but I didn't recognize it as Taylor Jenkins' first win. It was Ja's block on Kyrie and also Ja's pass to Jay Crowder for a buzzer beater. And I was actually telling you this in the hallway before the game on Tuesday. Like, Taylor Jenkins didn't even react to that shot, and now he's like one of the more emotional guys on the sidelines that you'll see across the league. And so I find his growth to be interesting. And then I think the other part of writing about the moment was just sort of telling the story about how he got to this point with the Grizzlies. And you talked about how they, a lot of the players haven't had other coaches. I mean, maybe in college or other places,
yeah.
but
NBA head coach,
NBA head coaches. I'll say this, and this is not because I know Taylor Jenkins has gotten a lot of criticism this year, and I do think some criticism is fair. And as an NBA head coach, you've got to expect criticism.
Right.
So I'm not saying this in defense of Taylor Jenkins. I'm just going to throw this in there as information. When we were talking about the quote unquote hot seat stuff over the summer, I had 2 different people text me, and both of them have been a part of different organizations, 3-4 organizations for one of these, and lots of coaches. And both of these people told me that Taylor Jenkins is the single most detailed, like focused in on the littlest things head coach that they've ever seen, like that they've been around, that they've worked around. And that sort of aligns with what Luke Kennard had to say, as you mentioned. And so I just find that to be interesting. You know what Taylor said at his opening press conference? He said that he was called smart, he was called organized, and he said that he had a competitive fire to him, and that was kind of what fueled all of it. A few moments we have seen that from him. I think the fine after the playoff game in Minnesota, the fine after the NBA Cup loss to the Jazz last year, in which he called the officials effing atrocious, the
Right.
the moment where he ran out onto the court in defense of Jaren Jackson, like I think last year against the Lakers, I think that he has done things to earn that respect from his players, both privately, I'm sure, but also publicly in those instances. So, um, but yeah, I can't speak to the history of the Grizzlies coaching staff the way that you can, but I do think it was a
Well,
good for
I
him.
mean, ultimately, ranking coaches is a parlor game. It's just something to talk about, but it's not. It's not. It doesn't matter. It's not important. I mean, there are coaches who are good. There are coaches who, frankly, aren't that good. And Taylor Jenkins is on the good side. And so, at that point, it's more a matter of the organizational stuff and how good your players are. I mean, a good coach is important, but it's only one piece of the puzzle. And so, you that box is checked, and it's more about the other stuff, right?
What has the mix been like in terms of coaches that are good and not that good in Memphis? Like it's been, is it about an even split?
Well, hopefully they're not listening. Mark Averoni was a mess. Nice guy, smart guy, did not work as a head coach at all. Sidney Lowe was like, basically the Walking Dead when he showed up. Tony Baroni was an interim and like was never gonna be an NBA head coach. He was just running out the string. Tisdale had success, but he had success with a good roster he inherited, and I was not, even before things broke up, I was not the biggest fan of him as a head coach. I didn't think he was that great. I thought Bickerstaff was good. Bickerstaff had sort of hit a ceiling in his stops, but he keeps getting opportunities. And his reputation is probably as a guy who raises the floor more than the ceiling. Maybe that's fair, maybe that's not. But he didn't have a good team to work with when he was head coach of the Grizzlies. But he was a guy who I believed what he was when he was talking. I believed it, and so I had a lot of respect for Bickerstaff, even though he did not have success.
Yeah, well, I just was curious because the reasoning, like it is a rarity for a franchise to hold on to a coach as long as they've held on to Taylor Jenkins. Like it just is. And
He is the longest tenured in terms of at his current job. He's the longest tenured coach in the NBA who has not won a title.
right. And so, there's got to be reasoning for that. And I think maybe it's the Grizzlies just recognizing that, if you go out and hire new guys, it could be a mixed bag, and you have a guy here that's won 50 games twice already.
Well, I don't think they've. I think the relationships are strong within the organization, both up and down, like up to front office and ownership, down to players and assistants. Right? He's good at managing the relationships up and down, which is an important
Yes.
part of the job. I also think that he's good. He's been a good coach, and I think they've shown the patience to not, get rid of the good in pursuit of the perfect, which may not exist. I also think even though the playoff record is very mixed, like if you step back from it, it's you're 1-3 in playoff series. I lost 2 series. That's the higher seed, I believe. 0-3 in game ones on your home court. Like that is not good playoff performance. Now, if you watch closely, like we do, like we're actually watching these games, you understand the specifics a little bit different. Like you lost to a Golden State team that ended up winning the title. You lost to a Laker team that had just won a title with those two best players, and then you have guys that we understand the specifics that make it look better up close than it does
That
from
Jazz
afar.
series, they weren't going to win. Like,
Yeah, right.
right.
And so the playoff stuff looks better if you actually paying attention to the details of it. That said, sometimes like a team butts its head against the ceiling and you feel like you need to shake things up. And typically in the NBA, the coach gets shaken up before the players do. And I'm not saying that will never happen with this Grizzlies team, but they have not reached that point. And so, he's still got room to operate in terms of taking this team where it wants to go.
All right, so moving on to injuries. You've got Vince Williams Jr., who went down in Tuesday's game, did not look good,
No.
ankle. Assume he's gonna be a while before he's back. You've got Ja, who's getting closer, is still considered to be week to week, but we're approaching 3 weeks now in which he's been out?
Let me ask you, and then you're going to get to it. I sort of short circuit you, but yeah, Zach Edey with the sprained ankle, but he was never even in a boot. It doesn't seem that bad. So are we already Vince Williams? I think we agree that may be a while. We'll wait to hear more.
Yes.
On Ja and Edey, have we reached the point, the ceremonial point in Grizzlies fandom where you're waiting for the doubtful designation to pop up on an injury report? Are we far enough along to be on the lookout for the doubtful?
I mean, we're on the front end of that.
Okay. Yeah.
We're on the front end of that.
I'm not expecting that to happen for this game in Chicago.
No. But the thing is, I mean, Ja's tweeting cryptic stuff, so you never know, right. I suppose. I don't want to, but I don't expect it. They are going to do the ramp up. They're going to do that. They're going to do the ramp up. They're going to do the on ramp. They're going to do all that. And we haven't been told that Ja has started the ramp up process. We have not been told that. And
I don't remember. Tell me, you may remember or may know in a way I don't, because you're the beat writer and I'm not. But I don't remember there being any talk of Desmond Bane on the ramp up process. I felt like he was just like, week to week, and then suddenly he's on the doubtful.
No, I don't. Yes, I would. I think that's fair. That's a fair point that you bring up. But with Ja and the amount of times that he gets asked about and what that injury was, because like when they said week to week to me, you tell me if you took it differently. That to me suggests like, all right, well, as soon as they feel like they can play, they'll play. Versus,
that seems to be what happened with Marcus Smart and Desmond Bane.
Right. So maybe it's the same with Ja, but right. I feel like, I don't know. If you're going to miss 3 weeks versus 1 week, there's a big difference. And Marcus and Dez just weren't out that long. They were out 4 or 5 games.
When the Ja injury happened, I assumed the day that they put the report out and explained it, I assumed he wasn't going to show up until December. But the mood, the vibes around it are more optimistic right now than I anticipated that they would be at this point.
Well, Ja's on Twitter responded. He responded to Anthony Sane and said, he's going to be back sooner than you think. And, he's still out there tweeting at 12:12 a.m. last night. He tweeted 12:12. So it's just it is a little bit of a mystery, but I think we're getting closer. Like, I think we're at the point where we can start to wonder if like we are going to get a doubtful that's going to pop up, next week.
I feel like Edey could be back earlier though than Ja. The Edey thing doesn't seem that bad to me.
Here's what I can say on Edey. No boot. Obviously that was good. The fact that he's already putting weight on it. It was swollen.
Okay.
It was. So there's swelling that's going to have to go away before I saw the ankle after the game and the next morning, and it was still swollen. So there's gonna be some process there and like letting that heal. Other injuries. Let's see. You've got Cam Spencer coming back, or making his debut, I guess I should say.
Right.
He played less than 10 minutes?
Yeah, about 9 minutes.
Last night?
He sort of what may have been the Conchar role if Conchar had been available as the 10th guy. I'm assuming we're not going to see, unless injuries prompted, I don't think we're going to see a lot of Cam Spencer. I certainly think he's more in line for minutes. I'm more interested in giving him minutes in real basketball than Yuki Karamura or Colin Castleton. But given the makeup of the roster, I don't think he's going to work his way into the regular mix anytime soon.
I hear a lot of good things about him.
Oh, I agree. The organization is very high on him.
Very clearly. Yeah.
I am an uncommitted voter on Cam Spencer as an NBA player.
We need to see him play.
I got to see more. Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't seen all that much. He's a a great shooter, like that's for certain. But to be a great player, you've got to be better than just a great shooter. And so I don't know. It was like I thought he had a couple of opportunities. He could have shot the ball last night against the Sixers, and he didn't.
He made a couple nice passes when he first came into the game, and then they had a good flow going, and it was to set up a couple other people's threes. To me, it looked like when he got opportunities, he was really having trouble getting separation. I think the adjustment for him to the size, speed, athleticism of the NBA is going to be a big adjustment. Now, he is someone who is a very good basketball player, and it has worked at every level so far that he's gone through, including, NBA Summer League. But I feel like the NBA is the highest, hardest level, and I think there's a real adjustment for him. I think it'd probably help him to go play with the hustle, like conquer that.
I definitely think so. Yeah, go get some bounce passes from Yuki.
Right,
get some shots up. Yuki with 15 points and 16 assists in for the hustle yesterday. 10 a.m. game in front of the kids. It was the Children's Day at the hustle game. Yeah, if you want to read about Cam Spencer, I don't think I mentioned it on the pod. You can search his name on the Daily Memphian. I wrote a story about him investing in this cold plunge company that is also like conducting a clinical trial to show how PTSD helps, or just to show how cold water immersion can help treat people with PTSD. So that's pretty cool. If you didn't read that, is there anything I missed?
No, I don't think so. I think, we got the game at Chicago this weekend and then a nice little homestand next week for Thanksgiving.
Well, that will do it for us. As always, thanks for listening. For Drew and for Chris, we're out of here.